Ready? Okay. Welcome, everyone. A pleasure. Thank you so much for showing up at our second Facebook live stream town hall. We're in my house here, and we're close to the primary, May 8th, and looking forward to a good outcome, and we feel very confident. And so we're open for questions, and while I'm here, I want to extend my condolences to the family of a slain police officer, Rob Pitts, a 16-year veteran of the Terre Haute Police Department from Sullivan, Indiana, who was investigating a homicide yesterday and was shot and killed. And we send our condolences to his family and our prayers to the family of the slain officer. Very, very sorry to see another one of our great law enforcement officials that was tragically murdered. And again, my sincere condolences to the family. So I want to talk about the campaign. We're very close, as you know, to the primary, which is coming up Tuesday, May 8th. And I want everyone to know that we really are launching a full-service, comprehensive campaign effort. And there's truly no stone unturned here. So, I mean, we've got everything covered. We're on TV. And we're on Fox News and other venues. We were on Roseanne for a while. We've got mailers going out. We have a lot of radio, including 1280, I should say, which is talk radio. We have print media, heavy social media, email marketing, digital marketing, and something that I think is really special to our campaign. Big, heavy, grassroots campaign, including door-to-door and a lot of yard signs. And you're going to see our yard signs out there. And I like them yard signs because they really create a kind of momentum, and they reflect a grassroots support of our campaign. And, we're running against the establishment. We're running against the empire. They're very powerful. We understand that. They're entrenched. They're well-funded. They're well-networked. They have all the usual support, all the special interests, all the corporate interests, the lobbyists, the Chamber of Commerce, and so on. And I want everyone to know that this is an outsider, activist, insurgent campaign against an establishment that has been very destructive. And we are winning. Okay, so we have serious grassroots support, and a lot of that is volunteers that get up and spend the whole day knocking on doors, and we really appreciate that. And I think in the end, going to each voter's door and asking for their support, for their vote, is probably the most effective way to move voters. And so, as I say, it's a full spectrum, comprehensive, full service, no stone unturned effort. I want you to know, all of you out there who are supporters of me, we're doing our job, and we plan to win this. There's a lot at stake. The country is at risk. And and we're hitting it hard. I would ask everyone out there listening to tell your friends, tell your family, get out and vote. Tuesday's the day. Make sure you get your vote in. We really need it, obviously. In the end, that's what it is. I mean, all the marketing and so forth, it's there to serve a purpose, which is to get votes. So we need your vote. Tuesday's the day. I guess the early voting is probably over for now. So if you haven't done it, Tuesday's your day. Definitely ask for your vote. I appreciate your vote. And I'd like you to get out there and support me with your vote.
All right, so the first question we're going to ask is today the Courier Press in Evansville put out a piece where the Vandenberg chairman, Wayne Park, many would say would be a moderate Republican, said that you're unable to win moderate votes in the primary. You have any comment on that?
Well, Wayne Parks is, I guess, sort of the prototypic, well, if I may say, rhino. Real establishment guy. I mean, I have a good relationship with him. We're friendly. I wouldn't use him as your source. He's made a lot of mistakes already in candidates that he's supported. I mean, he's sort of part of the problem, just like my opponent, Larry Bucshon, is part of the problem. These are, people, just out of central casting for exactly what we don't want in Washington. I mean, Larry Bucshon lives in Washington, D.C., and I cannot think of any worse example of exactly the wrong thing to do. I mean, it's bad enough they already have a D.C.-centric vision, but then to go and move to D.C. becomes really an absurdity and so reflective of a certain type of attitude and bias that we just don't need. We need to devolve power away from Washington, back to the states, local communities, and the individual. And here he is, moving with his family to D.C. As I've been saying all along, if you have to live, work, and raise your family in the district that you represent.
Okay, speaking of Larry Bucshon and, again, the Courier Press, last week, Thomas Langhorne put out an article, questioning the campaign's claim of liberal Larry, and where he referenced 538 and Larry Bucshon's Trump score of 98% of voting in favor with Trump. Any comment on that? Well,
it shows you how far out of the loop and really understanding the conservative movement Tom Langhorne is. And if I may say, I've rarely met a more toxic individual than Tom Langhorne, who really manages to take whatever you say and distort it in absolutely the most malignant way. And so I just want to make it clear that I consider him to be truly a negative force and really destructive in his printing and his articles. And we may get into that a little bit more later. We'll see what comes up. But I would say, just to show how removed he is from the conservative movement, the fact that he would accept that as sort of some example of Bucshon's loyalty to Trump, a guy, Nate Silver, who used to blog with the Daily Kos, which is your penultimate left-wing blog site, and somehow think that that's reflective of anything. Anyone in the conservative movement knows where you go to get conservative opinion, and you certainly would begin with the Heritage Foundation, which is the oldest conservative think tank in D.C. It's been around since the 70s. And Larry Bucshon has a 52% Heritage Action conservative score. That's an F. All right, the House Republican average is 68%. And you're including all of these Republicans from many liberal states like New Jersey and California. And so yet, even with that, he's well below the House Republican average. And so it is, as I've been saying, Larry Bucshon is a very liberal Republican, and he's part of the problem. And, if I go there, I'm not going to get an F. I'm going to get an A. I'm going to try to get as close as I can to 100%. That's what we need. I mean, it's important to state over and over again that we have a liberal party in America already. We do not need a second liberal party. By the way, while I'm at it, let me just ask everyone, to like, share, comment on Facebook. get it out to your friends and family, and whoever is in your list of friends. Definitely appreciate it. The more this goes out, the more they can we can spread the word as I'm speaking, the better it will be. And also, let me not forget, I've got my beloved wife. We've been married since 1989. It's going on 30 years. And this is Ying. That's her nickname, Supit Moss. And we have 4 kids. And we met in Thailand. I worked overseas for 3 years as a volunteer cancer surgeon. And we met in Thailand. And then we actually continued on our journey together. And we spent an incredible couple of years working in places like Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. So you got 2 Hindu countries, and Thailand is a Buddhist country, and Bangladesh is a Muslim country. So an intensely multicultural experience. We did a lot of travels along the way. We were in Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and many, many adventures. If I may mention, I have a book coming out, A Surgeon's Odyssey, which you'll be finding out a little bit in the coming weeks, and I think it's an exciting story. And it details our experience traveling together as a husband and wife, and as a surgeon and operating nurse team. And I can tell you, the disease was really advanced, very challenging, and we had a great, great experience.
Mrs. Moss, Ying. So your husband's obviously been gone quite a lot over the last year, campaigning hard.
Yes.
How's he been with family life and everything before the campaign and even after? I mean, I'm sure from what I've seen, he's held on to being a part of the family, and from what my eyes, he's a good dad. What would you say, being around him 24/7?
Yeah, he's take a lot of time in campaigning and away a lot from home, but that's he want to do. So I support him 100%, and he's still doing a good job with taking care of the kids and being a good father. So I have nothing to complain about.
Are you ready for Washington if Tuesday proves to be a victory?
Yes, I do.
And kids ready for Washington?
Yes, I think
Okay.
they're ready.
Now, as a mother and seeing him as a father, what do you think are the values that he's instilled into the children?
In terms of the
What do you think as a dad, his values? What do you think how he's raised his kids and everything like that?
yeah, he's a very good father, and the way he raised the kids, I would say that I never seen the husband that really pay attention and devoted to the children, that is 100% to the kids. So I never seen a father like this, even my own father.
Now, Doc, being away obviously a lot in the year, it's been a tough campaign, but in the end, a lot of people being in politics are gonna throw stones at you on family life, but from what I've seen, you've been a pretty good dad, even being busy all the time and being gone all the time. What do you think is the most important things as a father, if you were speaking to other fathers watching, that you would instill in them if they're taking on a public role in politics or something? What do you think you would tell a father that's getting ready to do that?
Yeah, well, I think you really have to instill in your children your basic moral beliefs, your religious beliefs, your philosophy of life, and so I'm very devoted to strong families, and it's always been a part of my campaign that so many of the problems we have in the country are because of the breakdown of the family. And so I've always strongly emphasized the role of a strong 2-parent family, and how critical it is to have the influence of both mom and dad. And each has different gifts and background that are critical to the rearing of children. And so I strongly emphasize strong 2-parent families, with each of the parents doing everything they can to instill in them their values and the morality, their beliefs, their faith, and really their foundational beliefs about what is important in life, so that we're raising them, as good moral creatures that will grow up and have a strong moral perspective, a religious perspective, but then making sure they're strong academically and physically and athletically, and we take them on trips so they learn about the world, and I also like them to understand about the United States and what's unique about America. So at all times, I'm really working hard to instill them the values that I think they need to be good, strong, engaged, productive individuals, and we will never stop doing that.
Okay, so we did just get our first question from Stephen. We kind of touched base on it earlier. The police officer that was killed. Obviously, there's been a lot of police officers that have been murdered in cold blood. This one, though, is a little bit different as it's in your district.
Right.
What do you say? What would be your plan to kind of put this to rest, to end the cop killing that's going on, especially now that it's in your district?
Well, we have to respect law enforcement, and understand the incredible sacrifices that they make and how every day they risk their lives, and we must honor them. And we really have to fight back against the attack on police by certain groups, and even, if I may say, a certain political party, and in particular during the last administration, which was often very, very demeaning of our police and blamed the police and accused them of things that are truly false. So I want everyone here to know, I will be a defender of law enforcement. And I respect the job they do. It doesn't mean that every cop is a great cop. I mean, there's good cops and bad cops. There's good doctors and bad doctors. We understand that. But by and large, these officers go out and risk their lives every day. And we have to respect them. And we have to push back against those who would demean law enforcement. And believe me, I am pro-law enforcement. Yeah, go ahead.
So a question we'd gotten on Facebook yesterday after this is, in our district we border with Illinois, which is a pretty liberal ran state. Indiana, of course, is a pretty easy state to go and get a concealed carry permit. And we do have a lot of individuals who work across the border in Illinois, which does not respect the license handed out by our state government. What would you say to that, to the people that live in the district but work in some dangerous areas in Illinois? What do you say about the gun laws on the national level?
Yeah, well, clearly we need concealed carry national reciprocity. In the same way that you can drive your car in any state, if you have a legitimately obtained concealed carry permit in one state, it ought to work in every other state. And and I think an armed citizen, an armed law-abiding citizen, is a free citizen. Is a citizen that has the ability to defend himself and to defend his loved ones and to defend his private property. And I want everyone to know that I am a defender of the Second Amendment, period. All right? I think that the Second Amendment is our first civil right because it makes sure that all of the other rights are protected. Okay, that's where the rubber hits the road. All the other rights are words on paper. What gives you the ability to defend these other rights is your Second Amendment right. So I just want to say that in every way I believe that the founding document of this country, which is the Declaration of Independence, which speaks of God-given inalienable rights that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that that implied in that list of inalienable rights is the right to self-defense. The right to self-defense is a natural primary right. And when you say that you have the right to life and to liberty, it assumes, it implies a right to defend that. And I think that's just obvious and logical. So in my reading, the Declaration of Independence and the listing of our inalienable rights assumes the right to self-defense. So I am a very strong defender of the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, I'm a defender of it, and that's it. And again, let me remind those listening, May 8th is the primary, and I appreciate your vote. Just keep me in mind. We definitely need your support out there. It's still going to be a tough race. It's always tough to take out an incumbent. So get out, share, like, comment, spread the word, and we appreciate your vote on Tuesday, May 8th.
So next question here, and it is from Richard Klein. Right now, Trump is obviously talking about shutting down the government for the sake of the wall. Do you support the wall?
Well, yeah, I support the wall and a lot more. And, Trump really launched his campaign on this whole issue of immigration and securing our southern border. So let me begin by saying it is a scandal and a disgrace that 16 years after 9/11, we have not secured our southern border. You've had Republican presidents and Democrat presidents, Republican houses and Democrat houses, none of which somehow felt it was necessary after 9/11 to secure that southern border. And that's a scandal, okay? That's not just an immigration issue, it's a national security issue. So number one, yeah, we have to secure our southern border, and we need to build a wall. But let me go further. I want everyone to understand that I oppose DACA, I oppose amnesty, I oppose sanctuary cities, I oppose birthright citizenship, and I oppose chain migration. And yes, I would build a wall. I would have a merit-based system, so we are getting the best and the brightest coming into the country. I want to make it clear. It is time for American citizens to step out of the shadows. It is time for us to think about American dreamers. And it is time to begin deporting illegal aliens. That's where I'm at on immigration. Immigration must serve American citizens, American workers, and the nation as a whole. And we don't do that by bringing in people that come here illegally that have no English skills, little or no education, little or no skills so that they can contribute to a post-industrial, high-tech, modern economy. We have enough of our own poorly educated and poorly skilled. We don't need to import more. We need the best and the brightest from around the world, a point merit-based system, so the people coming here can make a strong contribution to the country, not become a public charge, and will assimilate readily. That's the way the immigration policy must be. It must be what I refer to as an America First immigration policy. And on this issue, I will not back down.
Next question would be, of course, the omnibus. We've spoke about the wall. A lot of people don't know that the omnibus actually didn't have very many conservative priorities in it. Majority of it was Democrat priorities. A lot of people don't know that, the bill did not fund a border wall here, but however, it did fund a border wall in a foreign country. And, what would you have did different? Some people would say shut down the government. Others would say, like Bouchon, who has talked about the military and blah, blah, blah. What would you say as a congressman if that same bill came across your desk?
I would never in a million years have voted for it. Number one, it's a 2,300 page bill, $1.3 trillion. And it was out on the floor for 36 hours. Obviously, nobody read it. Just in general, this way of governing the country is so irresponsible. When you're voting on major funding bills like that, $1.3 trillion, and you can't read it. We need to go back to regular order, where you're getting what I refer to as small bite-sized appropriation bills coming out of the 12 subcommittees, reflecting the expertise of that particular subcommittee. It's out there for a week or two so that people, through the internet and so forth, as well as individual members of Congress, have the ability to go through it and read it and learn about it and see if it's acceptable. I mean, so that's called regular order. So again, these omnibus bills are utterly irresponsible because again, they're so massive, no one has the time to read it. Beyond that, it funded all of the things that we're against as conservative Republicans. It funded sanctuary cities, DACA, Amnesty, and Planned Parenthood, and many, many other things, and it added a $1 trillion deficit to be paid for by our children. I mean, it's so irresponsible for us to keep accumulating debt. It's one of the problems with our Congress is that they think only of the next election, but not the next generation. I mean, the worst way to pay for government is to borrow the money and then pay that back with interest. It's the most expensive way to do it. It's very irresponsible. It places the burden for that on your children and really beyond that, generations yet unborn. It's intergenerational theft. As strong conservatives, we reject that. And, so it's important also to understand that bill funded Democrat priorities. And so my question is, if we have both houses of Congress and the presidency, why are we giving the Democrats 80 to 90% of what they want? When are they going to make a stand for what we want if they don't do it now when they have a monopoly on federal power? When will they do it? The answer is never, and the reason is because they're not a conservative party. And this is why I'm running. We need a conservative political party to advance the interests and the causes and the policies of the conservative base. We do not have that. And as I've been saying all along, I'm concerned the conservative base may sit these elections out because they're not seeing their policies advanced by the Republican Party. And we may suffer reversals that will be damaging to the party and to the country. And so we need a conservative political party that will reflect the conservative interests of the base. We have a liberal party already. We don't need a second liberal party.
All right.
And finally, Bouchon voted for that bill. I would not have voted for that bill. He funded the Democrat policies. He voted for a bill that was praised by Schumer and Pelosi. If you're happy with that sort of voting, then he's your guy. I'm running to provide a choice. And that choice is, I have water. I'm going to take a little glass. Excuse me. All right. They're complaining about my voice. We need an opposition conservative party. We don't have that. Larry Bouchon is not the guy for that. I'm trying to provide a choice for voters to reflect the conservative values of the 8th District. That's why I'm running. If you want a conservative champion who's not going to let you down, who will be your conservative voice in Washington and will not betray your trust, I would be your guy. I'm not getting an F with the Heritage Action Conservative Scorecard. I'm not getting a 52%. Okay, so I'm letting everyone know about that. I will not be voting for a bill that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer is going to praise. Okay, I will never vote for that bill. I would vote for either a continuing resolution or I would shut the government down, because let me explain to you. You keep adding this debt. You keep ignoring the laws of economics. You will have not a government shutdown. And the government never shuts down. I mean, we have a government, it's the weekend, the government shut down. Anyone notice? Every day at 5 o'clock, the government shuts down. Every holiday, the government shuts down. All right, what I'm worried about is an economic shutdown. What I'm worried about is a societal collapse. What I'm worried about is a collapse of our currency, because we keep adding to the deficit, we keep printing money, devalues the currency, hyperinflation. All of your holdings are in money and in dollars, and it's a problem. So I want everyone to understand it's important to remember the laws of economics are important. We dare not ignore them forever for the sake of short-term political gain.
So, to be clear, if you were the congressman last month when the bill went through, you would have been in favor of a government shutdown.
Well, I would have offered for a continuing resolution to temporarily fund the government while we're hashing out the details, among which would be to balance the budget. I just think we got to get serious about it. I mean, let me just say the Republican Party, with both houses of Congress and the presidency, they have managed with this latest budget to make the Democrat Party appear as the party of fiscal prudence. And that's not easy to do. I don't applaud the Republicans for that achievement, but that's what they've done. We just need a strong conservative opposition Republican Party if we have any chance of saving the country. So, yeah, and in the end, if it would have taken a government shutdown, that's fine. Because again, I don't want a government shutdown, and we have, it's the weekend now. The government shut down. Anyone notice? Okay. 5 o'clock every day, the government shuts down. I mean, somehow we survive. What I'm saying is that we want to avoid an economic shutdown, a currency shutdown, a societal collapse as we continue to accumulate massive debt. So our goal is to stop short of that. And the only way is to be fiscally responsible.
Obviously, if you win, you're going to have some sort of agenda in Congress. What would be 3 bills you would author or co-sponsor in your first month or two in office?
Well, as you've heard me say already, I'm very big on immigration reform. I just think that is the issue of the day. And so I have an elaborate immigration plan that I've written about as a press release, and it's been published. And I would just follow it. You've heard me speak to that already, and so there'd be things that I mentioned already, and a lot more that would be part of that plan. I would obviously have to work with other congressmen to get to sponsor that and to get it passed. But I have a very detailed immigration plan, what I refer to as an America First immigration policy. That's number one. Number two, again, I've spoken about trying to become fiscally responsible. And, I really think we have to have the government live within its means. And that means cutting spending and reducing the size of government. And, I have plans for that as well. And then the 3 or 4 things. The third thing would be I would really want to fully repeal root and branch Obamacare, which has done enormous damage to the healthcare market. And as so many, millions of Americans have experienced, have resulted in, really soaring premiums, soaring deductibles, a loss of competition and choice. There are many areas of the country where there's only one insurance company. The whole idea of Obamacare was you're going to have a lot of choice. Well, obviously that was totally false. They have no choice, and many of these insurance companies are going bankrupt because they can't afford the various mandates and regulations of Obamacare. It's destroyed the healthcare market, And it's, again, hurt millions and millions of Americans with soaring rates and premiums and deductibles, as so many Americans have experienced. So there's a way around that, and I would recommend strong, free market healthcare reform, and I have a 10-point plan to achieve that. It's really not that difficult. I don't need 2,300 pages like Obamacare. Lastly, let me say we really need to rein in our out of control federal courts who are deciding issues that really should be decided by the elected branches of government. Those would be the big four things for me. Judicial reform, Congress has the power to do that. Repeal Obamacare, and then free market health care reform, getting fiscally responsible and balancing the budget, cutting spending, and then my America First immigration policy. And I've written about all of these things, are all available for anyone to see.
So let's go back to healthcare, because you're a doctor, Bhushan's a doctor, and recently he did an interview talking about his campaign with one of the Terre Haute news stations. His reason for running is to fix healthcare. That's his reason. He's got no other reason but healthcare. What's your comment to his reasoning for running on healthcare? As for a congressman who's been in since 2010.
Well, I don't think you need to pigeonhole yourself. I mean, I have many doctors to be honest, are not that knowledgeable about healthcare reform. I mean, and I don't think he's somebody that's really steeped in the issues, which is why he's so easily co-opted by the Republican establishment. Let me mention that I've been writing articles since 1992. I have a well-established paper trail, and now it's a digital trail of every article I've written, hundreds of pieces going back since I was writing about Hillary Care in 1992. So I am steeped in the issues, and it's not just health care. It's all of the issues. I have a lot of expertise in the Middle East and foreign policy. And, let's say the world of Islam, which I know a fair amount about, and culture and morality and the foundations of Western civilization, just really public sector unions, cafe standards, the environment, global warming, which I don't believe in, not man-made global warming, and really just many, many issues that I can speak of with a lot of confidence. I'm steeped in the issues, and it goes well beyond just healthcare. So I would not pigeonhole myself at all, but I do have a fair amount of expertise in healthcare reform, not just because I'm a doctor, because, again, many doctors don't know that much about healthcare reform. Some do, some don't. It just depends. But, it's good to have that background. But I've studied healthcare reform, and I have a 10-point plan to reform healthcare. But the problem with the incumbent is that he really is not steeped in the issues. He's not deeply knowledgeable about the issues. And hence he takes his marching orders from the Republican establishment. He was a very useful tool of John Boehner when he was Speaker, and then Paul Ryan. And that's part of the problem. He's not an independent thinker. I am an independent thinker. I know the issues, and many issues, not just healthcare. So, I would just say that I find that rather limited, that he would say he went there to... Is that it? Just healthcare? I mean, there's a lot of other issues, too. I mean, that's a big one. I agree. Many, many other issues that we should be knowledgeable of. I am knowledgeable of them. He is not.
If we can, for a little bit, have a few questions in regards to Donald Trump. Obviously, you would say you're a Trump-like candidate. And Bhushan, with his 538 score, also says he's a Trump-like candidate. Recently, a federal judge kind of showed himself against Mueller and his, some would say, witch hunt on Trump. What do you think about the Russian collusion investigation and Robert Mueller?
The Democrat Party just has never accepted the fact that they were defeated because they had a terrible presidential candidate, and that President Trump was really reflecting a movement that arose because of the 8 years of Obama. I mean, his contempt for the working class and for those who believed in traditional values, who believed in their Second Amendment rights, who believed in going to church and being Christians. And then his support by the slavish media that just were enthralled by him and never challenged him. So he just had a free reign. And he was a radical leftist, and he reflected that view, and he had contempt for working Americans. And what you saw in 2016 was this rejection of that contempt. And so you had states that have been Democrat states for decades, like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, that have gone Democrat at the presidential level for decades. We probably haven't won them, maybe since Ronald Reagan with his 49 state landslide. I'm not sure if Bush Sr. won them or not, but you'd have to go back to the 80s to see where Republicans took that, but it happened this time. And it really was a rejection of the contempt that the leader of the Democrat Party, the president of the last 8 years, showed for working Americans, and what Hillary Clinton famously referred to, as we all know, the deplorables, okay? Homophobic, xenophobic, this one, and sexist and racist, and all of those terrible slanders really reflected the attitude and led to the resurgence of a Trump-like candidate. And so, I mean, really the Democrats should blame themselves for the Trump phenomenon. And I am a supporter of President Trump. And let me, again, we have a primary. It's May 8th. We don't want to forget. We definitely appreciate you getting out there, sharing what you're hearing today. Share, like, comment. Tell your friends and family. Tuesday's the day. Need your support. Appreciate your vote. Asking for your vote. Thank you.
So you kind of touched base on the 2016 election a little bit. You mentioned Hillary Clinton, her deplorable comment, and you mentioned Donald Trump. So once Trump won the nomination, and even when it was basically the conclusion was that he will win, the Never Trump movement began. The Courier Press had noted that on July 30th, about a week after Trump became the nominee, when it was set in stone that the incumbent, Larry Bouchon, was on record calling Trump divisive and unfortunate. Do you have a comment on those comments? And would you say that there's a certain danger to, a Republican congressman referring to the Republican nominee in that way?
Well, it is. But, I mean, first of all, I find it really hilarious that the incumbent is trying to trumpet, well, let me use a different word, parade himself as some sort of, ultimate pro-Trump guy, when during the primary he endorsed his opposite, which would be Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is famous for one thing. He was part. That's the exact opposite of what won Trump his election. He ran on securing the southern border and building a wall and ending illegal immigration. So I would say that it's really sort of silly for him to try to masquerade as a big Trump guy when his obvious support was with somebody who you would say on that most critical of all issues facing the country, which is immigration. He endorsed the opposite, which would be open borders, amnesty, Marco Rubio. So it just doesn't really come full circle at all for him to claim that he's a pro-Trump guy. But then furthermore, after Trump had already succeeded in winning the presidential nomination for the Republican Party, he had made some comments about supporting a Muslim ban from terrorist countries. I support that. Bhushan called that divisive and unfortunate. The job of the government, I mean, it's not all this wealth redistribution, I'm sorry to tell everyone. It's to protect the homeland. And if you've got potential terrorists that there's no way you can know one way or the other, you can't vet them. You can't do that. You don't know. There's no way to know it. There's no record. There's nothing that they would have in those countries. Your obligation is to protect the homeland. And let me remind everyone, 9/11 was not something that happened because another country invaded us. It was a failure of immigration. Those 19 hijackers from Saudi Arabia and maybe some other country, mainly Saudi Arabia, they had overstayed their visa. That was an immigration issue. And it led to the worst tragedy on American soil in our nation's history. 3,000 Americans died that day. They shouldn't have. They should have been tracked, and they should have been expelled from the country for overstaying their visa. And many other such examples of that. The Boston Marathon and just really others. We can go through the list. But that major one, that 9/11 one, was not that the Taliban invaded us from Afghanistan. Those were hijackers that overstayed their visa. We need to get real about immigration. And this entry-exit visa, 45% of illegal aliens are here because they overstayed their visas. We've got to end that. And that's certainly part of my America First immigration policy. But getting back to Bhushan, he's the opposite of Trump. He's a Rubio guy. He's an open borders guy. And you know why? Because he's beholden to the open borders lobby. And we're talking about the Chamber of Commerce and various corporate interests that like that because they like the cheap labor. It's cheap labor for them. It's expensive for everybody else because they bring in their dependents. Many of them wind up on public programs. They've got to be educated. They got to be fed. There are many expenses that go beyond just the cheap labor for that one particular individual that may work. They're expensive. That's expensive labor. But so he's being, I think, supported by what I refer to as the Chamber of Commerce, Wall Street Journal types, the open borders lobby, and he knew to support Rubio would bring in, the kinds of contributions that he's looking for. I'm opposed to that. Okay, we need to use immigration policy in a way that protects this country, not the interests of various special interests or corporate interests or immigrants or the countries that want to send them here, but of this country, America First.
So, if we can touch base, and we were talking a lot about immigration, you come from a different perspective when you talk about immigration. In your early medical years, you of course traveled through Muslim countries, countries in Southeast Asia, countries stricken with poverty. I mean, you know immigration from experience. What have you learned from your travels abroad? Obviously, you met your wife in Thailand. You have a very multicultural family. There are those that might say you're too far right on immigration policy, some that might call you racist, and some that might say, you're a Nazi or whatever it may be. But from your standpoint, visiting these other countries, as a Jew in Muslim countries, what do you have to say about the experiences you learned there?
So when we...
You have to get visa, everything. It's just, you can't overstay. We never overstay. And they tell us you can't overstay, otherwise you'll be in trouble. They put you in jail or you got to pay fine. No. In those countries, they tell you
That's right, very strict.
very strict.
Yeah, but I would just say that a lot of people don't realize that Thailand, the 4 southern provinces of Thailand are Muslim majority. And there's a lot of strife. I didn't know that, because you always think of, like Israel, the Middle East, or the war in Iraq, and, it's because of American foreign policy. Well, I mean, there's nothing to do. What's going on in southern Thailand with, and Ying actually is the one who told me about this, that, they had, explosions at railway stations and movie theaters and at schools because of, Muslim separatists. And some of the Buddhist temples in southern Thailand sometimes face a lot of hardship because they're not treated well. I didn't really know about that, because you never think of Thailand as being sort of some hotbed of Islamic separatism or activism, but Ying actually educated me about that. I don't want to leave it with that totally, because I always want to emphasize I did have a wonderful experience with Muslim colleagues in Bangladesh who remain, even to this day, amongst my best friends and wonderful colleagues. So it's not just some sort of condemnation of all Muslims. I would never say that. What I would say, though, is that Islam has a history. It's a 1,400-year history. And we have to understand that in the end, within 100 years, Islam had gobbled up a third of the planet. Okay, it came in, around 620, I guess, when Muhammad emigrated from Mecca to Medina, which is when they start, I guess, the beginning of their religion. And 100 years after that, they had gobbled up a third of the planet. They didn't do that through gentle persuasion. It was through conquest. And to me, I don't really feel that Islam is a religion like any other religion. I think it has a militant aspect. I think it is a supremacist, expansionist, universalist religion that in the end, within its scripture, calls for a global caliphate. And there are many aspects of Sharia law that are built into the religion that are really not compatible with our Western culture or civilization, our constitutional system. And overall, I think it's not a great idea to bring in large numbers of Muslims into Western nations. And we have a living experiment going on. It's called Europe. And they're having serious trouble. And it's not just terrorism, it's other things. It's like, rape and welfare dependency and crime and so on. And you got places like Sweden, it used to be like a good place to live. They have no-go zones there now. And in London and in Germany. You have to defend your culture. And I think I would, in general, be very careful about importing large numbers of Muslims into Western nations. That's
So,
it.
a little bit lighter tone here on the question. Ken asked, obviously Election Day is Tuesday. Are you feeling excited about the campaign and Election Day on Tuesday?
Yeah, I am. I think it'd be very exciting, and I think we're in a very strong position, and that I believe we are going to pull out an upset victory, and that'll provide me with a platform to speak to the issues that I think need to be addressed. And we spoke about a lot of different things, but at the most fundamental level, I really believe strongly we must restore our self-confidence as a culture, as a civilization. We have to embrace our Judeo-Christian foundation. And I always speak about that. What is unique about America is that it's founded on the Judeo-Christian tradition. from Jerusalem, where right there in Genesis, God made man in His image. And I mean, that's such an elevating thought. And I always emphasize that what's unique about America and about Western civilization is that it elevates the individual. And that's unique in human history, and it's based on our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And that what's required with that is that the central government in Washington, D.C. be small, and that it devolves power and resources back to the states, back to local communities, and back to the individual. That is Americanism. That is what I support.
So this is going to be kind of a three-part question from James. We've already discussed the Mueller situation.
Well, I didn't say much. It is a witch hunt. And I am just, the real collusion was between the Obama administration and the Democrat National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign and Russia. All right? You know, the whole dossier, Fusion GPS, paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC, and then used to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on private American citizens, members of the Trump campaign in the middle of a presidential election. And we can go on, you know, we don't want to take up the whole time. It is a witch hunt. It is corrupt. It is an abuse of power. The federal government and the FBI and other intelligence services have unlimited resources, and they are attacking private citizens, going well beyond the purview of trying to identify Russian collusion between the Trump campaign, which does not exist, while ignoring the real collusion that existed throughout the Obama administration and Russia. That's right. My two kids have come back, but that's okay. So that's the real collusion. The collusion is between the DNC, Hillary Clinton, and the Obama administration and Russia. Christopher Steele was working with Kremlin operatives, obtained this salacious material about Trump, and that was then paid for by the FBI, fed to the FISA judge, not told that it was paid for by the DNC and Hillary. And so then that led to a FISA warrant that led to spying on private individuals and really destroyed General Flynn's life, bankrupting him. This unmasking of individuals, the dispersing of this information throughout the government, and then leaking that to the media. Obama administration. That's the collusion. Jeff Sessions, please either step down or call for a real investigation of the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton, and the DNC in Russian collusion. And let's get off this thing about Trump. You've had a year. It doesn't exist.
So John Kerry recently has met with the Iranian government to do what he can to salvage the Iranian nuclear deal, which he had a part in. Some say that he's violated the Logan Act. What do you have to say about him basically working on behalf of the United States government?
Well, forget about the law. I mean, that's 1798. The reason that you would oppose him is because of all the really disastrous things that Barack Hussein Obama foisted on this country. And there were many. He doubled the national debt. He squandered our victory in Iraq that we had won with the surge in 2007. And then withdrew, and that led to ISIS and the suffering and murder and rape of tens of thousands of innocent people in Iraq and Syria, the meltdown in Syria, the humanitarian crisis, and then he overthrew Gaddafi and turned Libya into another terrorist snake pit, opened up our borders. But having said all of that, the real crime that this man inflicted on this country, on the Middle East and on the world was that he was fixated on this deal, this Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, that he pulled through, and in which he unleashed $150 billion in assets that were locked through the sanctions regime, and gave it to Iran, and basically paved a way for them to obtain nuclear weapons. This is the leading state sponsor of terrorism. And now they're free because of the ending of the sanctions regime to trade. And they have oil, and they're making a lot of money. And what are they using that money for? It's to fund Hezbollah. It's to fund Assad in Syria. It's to fund the insurgency in Yemen, and to really undermine Lebanon. And so what he's doing is he's creating a Shiite crescent, a Shiite fundamentalist crescent, where he will have access to the entire Middle East, including access to the Mediterranean. And all of this thanks to Barack Obama. And in 10 years, they're going to have nuclear weapons. I mean, how do we get to that? How is that a great deal? 10 years is the snap of a finger. I mean, it's such a flawed program. And let us not forget the $1.4 billion that he traded. So no, I would say that this bill, this is way worse than anything done by, for example, Neville Chamberlain. Everyone talks about Neville Chamberlain and the Munich Pact, but he didn't give him, $150 billion. So no, this is a terrible deal, and we need to get out of it. And John Kerry is just a spokesman for Obama, and I would reject totally this thing. So yeah, I'm against it. And while I'm at it, my friends, if I may say, after a drink here, May 8th is the primary. We need your vote. We need your support. So, like, comment, share. Let your friends know. Tuesday's the day, May 8th. And I appreciate your vote.
Any closing argument?
Well, I think that I always want to return to all the problems that I mentioned. I feel the most important problem is of a moral, spiritual nature, that the secular atheist left has taken over our culture, our schools, our campuses, and many of us may lose confidence in our culture and the religious moral foundations of the American project, of the American enterprise. It is a deeply moral nation, founded on religious moral precepts, and I've alluded to them as well. I would just say, in the end, it is the moral dimension that represents our greatest problem and our greatest deficit. And I would just urge everyone to restore their faith and to respect their culture, respect their traditions, to respect the American rule of law and American sovereignty, our language, our borders, our culture, and have confidence in this great country. In the end, it's a moral issue. And believe in your country. Believe in our traditions. I think if we get enough Americans believing that, we can have another great American century. And while I'm at it, let me again thank everyone for their support. I want to thank my beloved wife, who's given me permission to run. It's not easy on a family, as you could well imagine. And my children are patient with me, but they're pretty self-disciplined at this point. So I really appreciate my family and their support. And Yang, do you have any comments you want to make about asking?
May 8th, Tuesday, don't forget to vote for my husband. And thank you very much.
Thank you.